Welcome everyone to our pre-recorded lecture today on descriptive statistics and measurement. And as you can see, I have the PowerPoint open right here that we started on Wednesday. We are in our measurement module, which is the one here that started on 9:30. Here is Wednesday's recording in case you missed it, and of course the measurement PowerPoint. And I'm going to pick up with that today. So let's go ahead and open our measurement PowerPoint again. And I started with some questions on Wednesday where they said, well, what are we measuring? Why are we measuring things all of a sudden? Well, guys, we're measuring variables. We are in social science now. We are in quantitative methods. What is the major way we get information from participants in social science or quantitative methods? Bing, 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 it's surveys. So we need to figure out when we ask a question like, how does jealousy affect relationship satisfaction? How do we measure the amount of jealousy? We are measuring variables. That's what we're measuring. We now have to put all the pieces together. You ask these wonderful questions and you're making claims and you put all these variables in there, and now we have to figure out how do we put a survey together that measures all of that and can actually give us the answers to our questions. So yeah, we're measuring variables. We're trying to figure out how we're going to put a survey together that measures jealousy and relationship satisfaction and gender. That's what we're doing. So we started with the basics, and there are 4 different ways we can measure variables or levels of variables. And the first 2 are what we call discrete or categorical data. And this is defined by nominal and ordinal measurement. Nominal measurement simply is a category or a checkbox. Remember I said it's employment status, either employed or unemployed. It's a category. It doesn't tell us a level of satisfaction. It simply just tells us a check mark in a category. Ordinal, we said, tells us a rank order of something. And I said if I were to rank my preferences for president, I could put them in order 1, 2, and 3. What we don't know with ordinal is the distance in between. So I may rank my number 1, I think I said Mickey Mouse, but my number 2, which is a really long shot number 2, might be Donald Duck. It's like in a horse race. I can tell you who came in first, second, and third, but that's all you know is the place. You don't know by how much. Was it a wire finish for first, or was the horse lagging far behind? Ordinal data doesn't give us that information. It just tells us the rank order. The big deal here is we can't do much analysis with nominal or ordinal measurement. We do still ask these questions in surveys. 100%. There's tons of nominal and ordinal questions asked in surveys. But we also want to make sure we include some continuous data, which is interval or ratio. Interval now spans a continuum, and we can tell the different intervals in between the distance. That's what makes it interval. We now know the intervals in between, usually because whatever we're measuring is measured on a Likert scale, where you have a choice in answers between 1, strongly disagree, and say 5, strongly agree. There are equidistant levels of how you can rate that. So we can find out your level of empathy. We can measure your level of jealousy. We can measure your level of relationship satisfaction. Now, interval and ratio are basically the same, except with one caveat, and that is ratio has what we call, and I'm going to use very specific terms because that's what will be on your test. Ratio has an absolute or a true 0. What this means is on a continuum, with 0 in the middle, we can measure both positive and negative. If it's a ratio level, it stops at 0. It only looks one way. Most of the scales we use in the communication discipline are going to be interval. They span on a continuum or a spectrum. And the spectrum that we're going to be looking at is, of course, the bell-shaped curve or normal distribution. And we'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things you will need to do on your next test is be able to identify what type of variable measurement level the variable is. And we did a practice in the class on this. Let me go down to that practice. Remember this slide? If I want to know someone's level of organizational commitment, I'm probably going to ask them, that's not something, they could put strong. That doesn't tell us anything. Doesn't give us a whole lot to work with. So we're going to ask several questions about someone's organizational commitment on a Likert scale where they can either agree or disagree with numbers or intervals. If I'm just checking a category, like genre, my favorite genre of music, that's going to be nominal. Employment status is nominal. Relational uncertainty is interval. And I gave you a couple of easier examples to understand. When we measure temperature, do we measure it in both positive and negative? Ding, ding, ding. Yes, if we're using oh, I'm going to sneeze. Uh-oh. Okay, excuse me. I knew that's been there for a while, so we measure temperature in both positive and negative. We measure economics in both positive and negative. A ratio scale stops at 0. There's nothing below it. It doesn't have the rest of the continuum there. That's all you need to know about ratio. All right? Everything is mostly interval. So, one of the reasons this becomes important is, again, remember, we've put some great claims out there. You've asked some questions. You want to know about these variables. So now we have to figure out a way to measure them. And one of the things in social science that we look at is, again, this level of variable. I can only get so much information from nominal and ordinal variables. As a matter of fact, all they really do is describe. That's it. They cannot infer relationships. They cannot tell you levels of jealousy or amounts. All these do are describe a category or a state. And so we use descriptive statistics with nominal and ordinal data. However, interval, again, I can look at a much more complex set of data and scales. And these we are going to call inferential statistics. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. So we're going to look at our first set of statistics, which are descriptive statistics, and talk about what those are. You have probably at least heard of these before. They are what we call the measure of central tendency. Please be familiar with these terms. And the three measures of central tendency are the mean, the median, and the mode. And we look at these based on the population or the sample that we surveyed. So if I surveyed, or let's just say, I had you take a test. Out of everything in the class, I was able to find in that statistical analysis the mean or the average score of everyone put together. The average score was 84%, remember. The median, however, is the true middle or halfway point. This is really important, especially when you look at a good example is housing prices. When you hear about housing prices, they almost always announce the median price. Because if we took the average, it would be skewed because we have very, very, very wealthy homes here in San Diego, and it would bump the average up higher than it probably is. So we want what is the true middle or halfway point. And the mode is the most frequently occurring score in a sample or a population. We measure these based on the normal distribution or the bell-shaped curve. So I am going to attempt to draw because this is the part where I definitely missed the classroom and, believe it or not, the board. So, because my drawing is not going to be good, but here we go. There's our bell-shaped curve. It should probably be rounder at the top there. Can I just, erase the whole curve. Dang. Let's try it again then. All right, so there it is, essentially. And let's say that this could be negative over here, but I'm going to go ahead and make this 0 over here and make this 100 over here. So I can talk about our test. Where was the average score on our test? I'm going to say about here. This was the average, 84%. Where was the true halfway point of the scores? It was not too far off. It was just below this, believe it or not. The true halfway point was right here. 82 was where 50% were below and 50% were above. This is the average of all the scores. The median says this is halfway. This is where we had 50 people in the class, 25 people fell below an 82, 25 people fell above an 82. That is the true halfway point. And what score occurred the most frequently? Believe it or not, it was about right here. It was an 88. That was the most frequent score, or the mode, if you will. So this is where we are getting into some statistical analysis. Don't get scared, but that's what those statistics tell us. We do use them in real life. Well, gosh, I really need to get better at drawing. I am not an artist. So at any rate, we do use these all the time in real life. You have kids someday and you want to know where your child's growth percentile falls on the bell-shaped curve. I have professors who have demanded that we use a bell-shaped curve in grading students. Okay, this one's a little not so good, but let's check it out. We'll put that right down. That would be your 70%. A lot of people say in the grading world, your average score should be a C. You guys hate that, don't you? Most of our test was skewed positively if we were to look at it. Oh, I'm so terrible at this. I don't know if this is working or not because I just hate everything I draw. La, la, la. Okay, this curve, you know, it's there. Let's take a look at it. Most people say your average score on exams should be here, a C. And you could tell no one failed our exams, so we were all piled up over here high. If these were all the different scores on the exam, this is what we would say would be a bias to a positive skew, because we were all on the high side on the exam. Nobody was down below. So yes, we're going to start talking about this bell-shaped curve here that I'm now just messing up. All right, let's go back. We'll talk about a few other things. We're going to get through this. I just wish I had a board in the classroom instead of a mouse to draw with. All right, so the mean is the average. The median is the true halfway or middle point, and the mode is the most frequently occurring score. In descriptive statistics, we also have measures of shape, and that kind of goes back to the normal distribution. Most of the time, we want to see a normal distribution. Now, let me go ahead and Google normal distribution image here, and it should come up. So when we talk about a normal curve, this is a really good picture right here. This is what we want. Everything is equal, and the mean should be right in the middle. That's a normal distribution. So what I was saying about grades is I had a department chair that he said if the majority of your students aren't earning C's, which is the average, remember C is average, if they're not earning C's, you aren't grading hard enough. So he would demand that our distribution had C's as the most frequently occurring grade we were giving students, because that was the average or the mean. Okay, so that's the way we can look at and interpret statistics. So we would like it to be normally distributed. I find with grades, most grades are skewed positively. And what that means, when we go back to our images here, I can very easily show you what a skewed positive image looks like. And these are also in your textbook. Skewed curve positive. Hopefully it shows me. There you go. This is basically, oh, these are all a little bit confusing, but they're basically saying everything is positive. There are no negatives to the curve itself. So everything is being pulled to one side. It can be negatively skewed so that everything is pulled to the negative side. We also have two more types of curves that are called kurtosis. I actually am going to go back up to the book at this point because this is in the chapter, and I think it would be helpful to see the diagrams that are within the book when you start reading this. So we're going to go straight to chapter 5 to start off with, because that's where you're going to get your initial introduction to measurement and levels of measurement. I showed you this the other day in class very quickly, and I encourage you to read it. Okay, so we're going to go to 77. Did I pick the right book? Yes, here we are. This is the table I wanted you to see. So it goes through nominal, ordinal, exactly what I was taking you through the other day, and ratio level. So this is what we want to be looking at. Okay, let's go ahead now and get to some of, I feel like that was not the right book though. Why did it? No, I guess it just seemed off. Sorry. All right, so let's skedaddle over to chapter 9. And this is where we're going to see our curves come into play. Why they put these two chapters so far apart, I shall never know, but they did. So we'll bear with it. We're going to go to 153 and take a look at some of these distributions. So, all right. This is really, look at that. That is a normally distributed bell-shaped curve. And it talks about measures of shape. And when we have skewed curves, we have some that are more negative and some that are more positive. Then we have these two specials kind of kurtosis, leptokurtic or platykurtic. Now, if you got a leptokurtic curve, you can see here that everyone scored the same score. Crazy that you all, what would I think as a teacher is all 51 of you got the exact same score. I would think someone got a copy of the test and it was a copy with fairly wrong answers that they all got the same lousy score. So if this happens, we usually know something is wrong. The same is true for, so a leptokurtic or peaked, it's too high in one spot. That's what a leptokurtic distribution is. A platykurtic is it's too flat. I don't necessarily, I wish they had done this diagram differently, but what it's saying is the scores are too spread out. It doesn't make enough sense. So there's probably a problem. And this is where we look at the range. And people, you always ask me the range. Well, what was the lowest score? What was the highest score? And if you think about tests, the lowest score might have been like a 46 and the top score was 100. And you see how we're missing anything lower? A platykurtic would say you were spread out all the way from 0 and every chance in between. And that's unlikely to happen. And then we have something called the variance. I'm not going to ask you a lot about variance, you guys. We are not getting into math. Everything I'm telling you, I want you to understand conceptually. There is variance. It says it's a single point denoted. It gives you all of that. But basically, it is really the difference between the scores, how much they vary. And I'll show you that again in another curve. They might have it here. This is what we call areas under the normal curve. And we want to see how much do you vary from the mean. Remember, the mean is kind of the average. Don't you want to know, are you average looking or do you vary a lot from the mean? Are you up here in that +3 standard deviations away from the mean, Brad Pitt-like? Okay, that's what we're looking at. We need a new person other than Brad Pitt. We need somebody else. So you guys have to tell me who's the up-and-comer everyone thinks is good looking. Girl or guy, need to know. So, I realize some of this can get overwhelming to confusion, but I really don't want you to do that. Try to stay just with me. What I want you to know or understand out of this lecture today is the basic 2 measures of descriptive statistics. So here we go. We have to measure our variables. Otherwise, we can't answer the research questions we asked. So we have to find a way to measure all our variables. Variable measurements come in 4 different levels: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Okay. Then we develop statistics based off how we measure the variables. The first set of statistics is descriptive. They are the measures of central tendency. We're looking at a normally distributed curve or population. The mean is the average, the median is the true halfway or middle point, and the mode is the most frequently occurring score. We also look at shape, measures of shape. Is the bell curve, is it normally distributed? Is it skewed positively or negatively? Or is it skewed in such a kurtotic way that it's either leptokurtic, too peaked, too high in one area, or platykurtic, too flat or too spread out? That's it. That's all I need you to know about descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics do one thing. They simply describe a population or a sample. They cannot do cause and effect or infer relationship. They just describe. There are a couple more. These are the measures of dispersion. I mentioned those very quickly. You have the range of scores, the variance between the scores, and of course standard deviation is the variance squared. I'm going to talk about these 2 more next time, but we are not calculating these. I do not care one bit about the formulas that are in your textbook. Please don't get stuck on the math part. Variance looks at how much did you vary from the mean, from the normal mean. Standard deviation is a statistic that calls it the variance squared. I will come back and talk a little more about standard deviation in class in our next lecture. So, I want you to be able to recognize the difference between ordinal, nominal, interval, and ratio scales. I further want you to know what is a normal distribution, what is a mean, a median, and a mode, how distributions can be differently shaped or skewed, and how we look at the whole range of scores on a distribution. That's it, guys. I hope that you do check out the chapter, but hopefully this lecture clarifies most of it for you, and we will continue on Monday and review and give you an assignment dealing with starting to be able to start looking at some statistics. All right, we are definitely in social science quantitative research now. We are constructing surveys and we're dealing with numbers. Essentially, if you're taking my quant class, you're getting all this information again, but you're going to actually be creating and doing the surveys and the statistical analysis. We'll see you next week.